As we approach the 1-year mark since the mass shooting in Lewiston tomorrow, a man whose son was killed that night and who became the face of the tragedy for many people across the country is once again sharing his grief and his hope.
NBC's Lester Holt, who came to Maine last October to cover the story, returned recently to reconnect with Leroy Walker and also to share the story of the shooter's family and how they are trying to make sure the victims are not forgotten. Here's his report.
I first met Leroy Walker on the worst day of his life. Leroy sat down with me less than an hour after learning his 57-year-old son, Joe, was one of 18 people murdered in a mass shooting in Lewiston, Maine.
You're all going through a lot of pain right now.
It's awful. That moment when I got the call that said, Joe is dead.
One year later, Leroy is still grieving and accepts that the man who did it, Robert Card, wasn't in his right mind.
I never hated this man for what he did because I knew he was mentally ill somehow.
Nikki and James Hurling's grief is even more complicated. The shooter, an Army reservist, was Nikki's brother, who died by suicide.
In this last year, where there are times that I did want to run and hide.
As Card's mental health declined in the months before the shooting, they say the family tried to reach authorities.
Was there a point where you became fearful for your brother and of your brother?
For me, I became fearful for him immediately when Ryan, my oldest brother Ryan, called me at work on May 3rd and said, Nikki, I need your help. He's at the point where he doesn't trust me. He's paranoid.
Earlier this year, a state investigation faulted both the Army Reserve and local law enforcement for failing to act on warning signs about Card's mental health. Nikki and James say they tried to get him to accept help.
I wish we had gone and tried to talk him into this, because if he would have been angry during that time, it would have been 2 instead of 18.
That's a pretty difficult assessment. It's okay.
I fight with myself every day for that.
Card had suffered traumatic brain injury, which his family believes was a result of his work as a grenade instructor.
His brain was hijacked. It was damaged.
Now, lawyers for 100 survivors and relatives of victims, including Leroy Walker, are suing the U.S. military for failing to respond to warning signs. The Army has acknowledged multiple errors by them and others and says it has since improved its procedures. The military does not believe Card's brain injury was related to his service. Nikki and James say their focus now is on the victims of the shooting and preventing future tragedies.
There isn't a time or an hour that we go by each day that we're not going to forget this. I'm not going to forget the 18
lives.
Those names are on the border of our property, their hearts, for the stories and the legacies that they had.
Beautiful people.
Beautiful people.
One of them, Leroy Walker's son, Joe.
He's the first person I think of and pretty much the last person when I go to sleep at night.
Lester Holt reporting.